Hello, my name is Marina Mayer, Editor-in-Chief of Food Logistics and Supply and Demand Chain Executive, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar titled Warehouse Automation. Warehouse automation continues to transform the supply chain and logistics industry, but how else do these solutions optimize the warehouse? In this webinar, discover how warehouse automation helps boost companies to the next level. Now let's meet the panelists for today. We have Reggie Twigg, Director of Product Marketing Digital Enterprise for ABBY, where he manages the company's enterprise markets for digital intelligence and intelligent document processing. Reggie has been in enterprise software for the past 2 decades, focusing on automating document processing applications with emerging artificial intelligence, machine learning, neuro-linguistic programming, and hyper-automation technologies. Doug Mefford is Product Marketing Director for Generix North America. He maintains more than 25 years' experience in the supply chain industry, including roles across many operational functions, from inventory control to operational leadership within an omnichannel distribution operation. He brings his cross-functional experience in supply chain operations and software product delivery to help define the direction for Generix's Solo Chain Warehouse Management System. Previously, Doug was the operations manager for the Dallas Cowboys for 8 years, where he oversaw their warehouse operations, retail distribution, silkscreen manufacturing, and direct-to-consumer order fulfillment. We have Jagan Reddy as a strategic advisor at Blue Yonder, where he leads logistics product strategy initiatives. A recognized supply chain thought leader with 20-plus years of strategy, technology innovation, and business transformation experience, he has led several global initiatives working with market-leading brands, retailers, and 3PLs to drive business growth, operational efficiencies, and cost savings. And Matt Rivenbark, Executive Sales Manager North America for SSI Schaefer, where he provides technical solutions for the food and beverage industry for both automation, material handling flows, cold storage, and warehouse management software. Matt also collaborates daily with both CPG, grocery retailers, and cold chain 3PL suppliers to provide real-life solutions in a competitive and rapidly changing industry. Just a reminder to the audience, there is a live poll question on how has COVID-19 and its requirements for social distancing, shipping versus shopping, and contactless processes impact your operational effectiveness. So please fill that out as you can so we can discuss the results later today throughout the presentation. Also, should the audience have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them via the console on your screen to be addressed at the end of the presentation. And there's the results, so we will review those in a little bit. So let's get started. The COVID-19 pandemic has created an influx in e-commerce shipments. Matt Rivenbark from Schaefer, I'll have you kick this one off. How has the shift to more micro-fulfillment and direct-to-consumer changed the way the distribution channel works?
Hey, first I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. DTC or micro-fulfillment has been around, for some time now, but obviously COVID has pushed even more volume through those channels. And the retail sector has been preparing for this for well over a decade now. But as grocers are seeing increased e-commerce orders, they're trying to figure out the best way to accommodate this new channel without creating a huge disruption to their current distribution network. Kind of the best idea that I've seen is filling this volume very close to the end customer, either by utilizing automation in a small footprint in the back end of a grocery store or at another location nearby, or even, sometimes they even have people directly picking from the shelves, by the store employees. I think that automation makes a ton of sense in this case because of who really wants to spend the money to bring product to the shelves only to pay to have it picked again by the store employees before getting it to the customer. And I think the back of store automation would really remove some of those intermediate touches that aren't providing any value.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jagan Reddy. Thanks for joining. I'll add a couple of things to what's been said. What we're seeing is both from a brand's manufacturer's perspective as well as a retailer's perspective, we're seeing the distribution and fulfillment footprint expanding to where there are more profiles that are coming into play, physical profiles, operational profiles, all in this notion of getting closer to the customer. That's where stores, dark stores, micro-fulfillment centers they're all coming into play, and so the traditional warehouse solutions are having to evolve to support these new footprints that are coming into play, and along with it, it's also about fulfilling as well as delivering to the customer and their various last mile delivery options that are coming into play. And those options have to interact with warehouse and fulfillment solutions.
And this is Reggie. I want to speak to one aspect of that, which is that all of the changes that have been described here have put particular focus on how automation works, or more importantly, doesn't work, how well it is adapted to these changing business conditions, especially in complex supply chains where a single change in a process can ripple throughout the operation. And we have seen this a lot in the past year, where organizations need to look at their processes a little bit differently and find better process discovery tools and disciplines to be able to do that. There are also changes to some of the logistics, like what the paperwork actually looks like, and we'll get into that later.
Yeah, this is Doug Mefford, and to add a little bit to that, as you think about the terminology of omni-channel, it's taken on a new evolution in today's marketplace because of the channels of demand that are impacting the distribution channels, or the distribution networks. All of those channels are having to funnel through micro-fulfillment or store fulfillment with the buy online, pick up in store initiatives that have accelerated. Seeing 10 years of e-com growth over the last 6 months has required a reactive response that has been pre-planned for a number of years. It's just accelerated the adaptations that are necessary to meet those needs, whether it's the inclusion of, various levels of automation, increased storage profiles, et cetera, within a facility to facilitate the change in distribution needs, whether it's, new order consolidation, blending store replenishment, because there's still a lot of in-store purchasing, along with direct-to-consumer, more small piece orders to minimize the amount of transportation impact to get it to that last mile destination, whether it be a micro-fulfillment center or the actual store for the consumer to pick up where necessary.
Yeah, in terms of the profiles that we're seeing starting to solidify and take hold, certainly the national, regional fulfillment centers, which have been there, they'll continue to be there. Those tend to be large facilities with high automation, high volumes running through. In addition, what we're seeing is two other variations. One is fulfilling from the back of a large store in an urban area or close to the population, where there are a set of stores which depend on that hub store to fulfill a large portion of orders, and the spoke stores then do the rest of the fulfillment. So there's automation in that hub store, and then there is manual picking that happens in spoke stores and get consolidated and get ready to deliver. The second type, and the third is the standalone micro fulfillment centers, where there's a combination of automation as well as humans in those centers.
That's perfect. So what kinds of software solutions are you seeing customers use to adapt to the different ways consumers shop? Let's start with Jack and Reddy from Blue Yonder. Let's start with you.
Yeah, so as we look at it from Blue Yonder, some of the shifts and themes that are emerging and evolving as we look to the future. Volatility and variability seems to be the main theme. Customers are working to adapt to, and that's in the form of demand. That's in the form of how you respond to the variability in demand. Seems like the pendulum of volatility seems to swing much more frequently now. The extremes are much more much more extremes as far as where the pendulum goes. In that, order reliability has become very critical, whether you're a brand or a retailer. Customer service, customer experience from an order reliability perspective is critical. And then the third is what we're seeing is retailers and brands are recognizing that the selling side of the enterprise is not particularly well connected to the fulfilling side of the enterprise. So a lot of focus on those three themes, volatility, variability. How do I ensure I deliver to an experience that I want to meet for customers, and how do I ensure my selling side is connected to the fulfilling side? So with those themes, what we're seeing is certainly from a fulfillment perspective, as I mentioned earlier, there are variations of warehouse solutions that are being framed to cater to the back of the store, the micro fulfillment center, the dark store formats, which are coming up, which are a combination of automation and humans. And then beyond that, as I had mentioned, last mile delivery management is becoming very critical, particularly for retailers. In addition, as you go upstream, the process of order capture and order orchestration, being able to promise, an experience, a set of options in terms of convenience, taking into account all of the constraints which exist in fulfillment, whether in these micro fulfillment centers or on the delivery side, taking all those into account on a real-time basis so that when I'm about to capture the order, I'm making the right promise that I know I can deliver to. And further upstream is there's just a lot of focus on the demand planning and replenishment side, where historically, as most of you know, there's been a lot of dependence on historic order data, syndicated data, versus point of sale data, so you can sense the demand and drive the response on a more real-time, predictive, granular, probabilistic manner, and that ensures inventory is positioned in right locations to ensure product availability. So you don't have shelves, without product. You don't make commitments when you're capturing the order, and then send a notification out to the consumer saying, "Hey, we're out of product." So those are the themes. So the upstream and the downstream, where we're seeing customers making investments, all in the name of how do we continue to remain agile and respond to these changes, which seem to happen much more rapidly and with much more extremes.
Thank you, Jagan. This is Doug. Thinking about that as you look at, the available to promise inputs, we're seeing at Generix more and more interest in kind of the collaborative replenishment visibility tools that allow for interconnectivity between supplier and distributor and reseller, retail, etc., to provide a more holistic, comprehensive view of where inventory is in the supply chain through connecting all of the players in that supply ecosystem to ensure that when an available to promise commitment is made, that it can actually be met. customer retention is such a critical key in the direct-to-consumer market. You can get things from many different suppliers in much the same way. To ensure you meet customer expectation is a critical component for that, while keeping a focus on minimizing the time to deliver to ensure an SLA can be met, while also minimizing the amount of touches or impacts in the distribution channels to satisfy that fulfillment, whether that be, again, last mile, as Jagan mentioned, or the various fulfillment operations, hub and spoke, that have already been mentioned, or dark operating back of the store fulfillment, as well as the interactions for the buy online, pick up in store. So we're also seeing, those in-store fulfillment applications to enable the inventory that already exists for the customer that does want to go ahead and pick it up. So it's really about addressing the inventory visibility and the overall supply to be able to ensure the demand can be met in the way or via the channel that the consumer ultimately is creating that demand.
And this is Reggie. I would add that while we have better technologies for fulfilling the needs that have been described so far, one of the things that we see a lot of is that the same businesses do not really have a clear picture of how their processes are actually working, and that they have systems of record, their ERP, their supply chain management, their supplier systems, their inventory systems, all those systems in place which define specific processes. But we see a lot of clients coming to us wanting to understand how those processes actually work, how the people interact with those processes, how, for example, documents are used in those processes. And they're wanting another level, a deeper level of process discovery as part of this, especially when circumstances, we talked about COVID, but changes in demands, changing in markets, changing in fulfillment channels, all those changes, when they occur, what impact do they have on your actual processes? And increasingly, organizations are looking for better tools to conduct discovery, analysis, and design of those processes. And then down the road, how do they monitor those processes to see if they're effective, see where exceptions are occurring, where there might be bottlenecks in the process, to see how that works actually in real time with how the people interact with the processes, how the systems are working, and all of that as a totality has become a big demand this year. And there are software tools that are emerging on the market that can actually help with that discovery process, understanding the people, interacting with the processes, interacting with the data and the content. So an important element to think about is doing a good, honest assessment of the process with the right tools that is system and function agnostic, but can show you the total picture.
Yeah, to add a couple of more things from a Blue Yonder perspective. The way we see it is supply chains have been set up and have been well functioning for the last 30, 40 years, but most of it has been set up to be very linear, very rigid, monolithic ways, and they've that has served well to date. Now, as we look to the future, we believe, given the change that seems to happen much more rapidly, and all of the trends that we're seeing, we believe supply chains need to be connected. They need to be able to adapt and change quickly. They need to be, intelligent from being able to sense, learn, and respond. So as we look to our solutions, majority of our investments are going in the direction of making supply chains to be much more adaptable and responsive to changes which are happening again much more rapidly.
This is perfect. So moving on to transparency, which kind of ties into that. Transparency and track and trace continue to be important facets to today's supply chains. Reggie Twig from Abby, I'm going to toss it back to you. How does something like a process delivery solution help companies better understand these warehouse processes as they've been impacted by last mile delivery?
Thank you. Well, process transparency is so critical in fulfillment and in responding to demand, but at the same time, there's not necessarily consistency on how that is approached and applied in complex supply chains, and those supply chains not only include the fulfillment processes that we've described, so there's demand, there's order, there's fulfillment, but then there is the logistical part of shipping those goods to the end user customers, or in complex supply chains where you have a reliance on raw materials and subassemblies that have to be shipped and produced and incorporated into new goods and then to be shipped out. So that end-to-end process can create different challenges for visibility, and you need a new set of tools to be able to understand and discover that. And so there are new technologies informed by artificial intelligence that can raise your awareness of the entire life cycle of an order or a customer experience through that initial interest, order, fulfillment, and shipping. But typically in organizations, those are separate processes that have to be coordinated together. And discovery often runs a little thin on its ability to see those handoffs between different systems and different parts of the process, especially when humans get involved to handle exceptions or to resolve problems that are not set up in the system. So process discovery using newer tools that understand the complex interactions among people, processes, data, and content can help to increase transparency between those different systems and those different parts of the process from order to customer delivery. Another aspect of process transparency is the logistical processes of actually getting goods to customers. If you rely, for example, on commercial shippers, the big names out there, as you might be familiar with, FedEx, UPS, the Postal Service, or the U.S. Postal Service, other carriers, there are requirements for how shipments get handled. In particular, there are waybills and manifests and bills of lading, and then there's a whole set of invoicing processes that are tied to that. So if you rely on third-party shippers or even your own shipping operation, that's a whole set of processes that typically are examined as an afterthought. Specifically, what I mean by that is the documentation required to fulfill those shipments and to make sure that they meet their service levels. Those documents are often processed either late in the process or not necessarily using the most up-to-date technology, and that itself can create bottlenecks that can delay shipment and fulfillment. And as other speakers have mentioned earlier, the jeopardizing of any service level or service level agreement with a customer can cause customers to shop around, especially now in a time of e-commerce when the market is so competitive for customers, not only new customers but customer retention. Those rules are changing, and the real question is, how well adapted are your processes? And I'm not talking specifically about processes in system, but overall processes. How well are those processes adapted to those changes? And that's what we seek to discover.
Okay. The COVID-19 pandemic also impacted many layers of today's supply chains. Doug Mefford from Generix, if you will, how does a pandemic like this, along with other supply chain disruptions such as natural disasters, impact reshoring, labor management, and the implementation of emerging technologies in the warehouse?
Yeah, thanks. It's a fairly deep question. You know, I've done a fair amount of study reading and things of that nature. You know, and what the global pandemic that we're experiencing has done is shown a light on some of the vulnerabilities in the supply chain. You know, particularly, you know, maybe too much dependency from a human perspective. You know, there was a June study done by the University of Warwick, and roughly 80% of the respondents in that said they'd experienced increases and decreases in demand, with up to 30+% of those demand changes being significant. So not only are we seeing a decrease in demand, we're also seeing an increase in demand. You know, the move from you know, luxury goods or wants to the more essential needs, and seeing that fluctuation in demand has a significant impact on those things. And, you know, Jan Goodsell, who's the professor of operations, was quoted in that study that, you know, using inventory as a buffer against disruption was really one of the most primary strategies deployed in the retail space. You know, it provides a great certainty. You know, we've talked a lot about meeting the supply. It creates that certainty. But, you know, really 29% of the respondents said they relied more on suppliers with agile manufacturing and distribution networks, which is, you know, potentially a more resource efficient and resilient response. You know, when we look at, you know, some of the impacts and some of the implications and some of the emerging needs that have come about as a result of the pandemic and other disasters, if you will, is that resilient and flexible response that allow for the efficient movement of goods through a supply chain. You know, it's impacting. There was another study I read done by Thomas that, you know, the CEO, Tommy Uphoff, was quoted as saying the COVID-19 pandemic will fundamentally redefine how industrial companies approach their supply chains and will further advance the digital transformation of manufacturing. And he went on to say, by embracing real-time resource management, redundancy, reshoring, and the convergence between the digital and physical, manufacturers will come out of this crisis stronger than they were before. You know, and really, as you look at reshoring and manufacturing, it decreases that lead time and allows that resilient, expedited response to a changing profile of demand that's experienced at the time of these, you know, in the pandemic or natural disaster scenarios that allow people to allow supply chains to respond without having massive delays. It basically allows for more agility. You know, as Jagan said earlier, you know, supply chain has been around for years and years and years, and the rigidity in supply chain has been somewhat its own difficulty. And that rigidity is being removed in many respects through a lot of different technology advancements, whether it's, you know, IoT devices and sensing through the entirety of the supply chain and making sure that there's not impacts based on environmental factors, going to the natural disasters and so on. You know, business process automation with AI and machine learning to start to facilitate more optimization, whether that's in a warehouse execution system scenario, a warehouse management scenario, a manufacturing execution system scenario. All of these technologies can be impacted by leveraging the emerging technologies embodied within artificial intelligence and the proper algorithmic responses to create the proper predictions and deliver a better result or a more predictable result for inventory optimization, inventory utilization, and again, satisfying the customer demand. And the question, mentions, labor management. I think there's a shift in the market in some respects from straight labor management that deals with human capital to more resource management that deals with both automation resource and human capital to ensure the most efficient and effective utilization of resources, moving away from the traditional historical-based push model of inventory management and planning and supply chain planning to more of a pull model with predictive analytics feeding where and when and how that pull is going to come about. But in labor specifically, you think pre-COVID, in the U.S. we had a 3.5% unemployment rate, so it was very competitive. So, labor management, the ability to engage employees to facilitate retention becomes an element that became a focus of many suppliers, and something we think about at Generix is how do we engage the employees and ensure that they'll stay versus just abandoning ship. That's probably going to continue as more manufacturers reshore. There's going to be competition for similar resource pool from a labor perspective. The other thing that I've seen is attrition modeling within software, looking at behavior patterns of employees and determining is there some way to intercede if they're becoming less productive. That can have an impact. They may be deciding to leave. So as you look at employee engagement, you look at employee resiliency or retention, that's how you can address some of the labor management elements. But the implementation of these emerging technologies and their influence on existing technologies, again, WMS, MES, WES type technologies, using some of the algorithmic tools of AI can increase the optimization of the movement of goods through that facility and ensure that, again, the service levels are being met, the proper inventory is at the proper place at the proper time to deliver that. And, at Generix particularly, we look at the WMS and MES, the warehouse management and manufacturing execution, combined in the Solo Chain product that allow for consistent functional flows in a diverse production environment, providing the effective track and trace from component all the way through finished goods to ensure that you get the consistency that is necessary to meet the demand. As more people reshore, as more people come online, it's an interesting prospect. In that same Thomas survey, there's over 1,000 suppliers in North America. 64% of the manufacturers report they're likely to manufacture or bring manufacturing back to North America, which is a huge influx of the need for manufacturing. You look at companies like Heinz. Who would have thought you'd have bought Heinz direct? But they're doing some direct delivery, the direct-to-consumer fulfillment. So the ability to distribute and manufacture in a, multi-function facility is important. I remember when I was at the Cowboys in doing what I did there, having manufacturing, wholesale, retail, and direct-to-consumer all under one roof. It was an effort to ensure that all of those functions were working collectively together, and that's, again, using warehouse management, manufacturing, distribution, and using the resources to satisfy the demand of those various verticals. So I think there are a lot of emerging technologies. You look at automation, AMR and AGV type technologies to enable social distancing, the lack of physical interaction with goods, thinking about the spread of a virus and so on. More automation solutions provide some of that distancing and lack of physical handling. And then, again, artificial intelligence embedded within various software technologies to ensure the optimization of movement through a facility. So it's an interesting time that we're in, and I'm seeing more and more implementation of these diverse solutions and more investment on our behalf into the artificial intelligence and the optimization side to ensure that the SLAs can be met, again, affecting and impacting customer retention.
That's a very good perspective, comprehensive, and you covered a number of areas. To add to that, as we look at it, it's all driven by customer, the experience that you're expected to deliver to customers. Otherwise, in this competitive landscape, as been mentioned in the past or earlier, losing customers is just not an option. So brands and retailers are very focused on product availability, delivery options, convenience, and certainly price. And as we look, from there, certainly positioning inventory, whether it's reshoring, or having more agile, responsive manufacturing, to potentially having more inventory than desired on hand, so that I am taking the cost of inventory as a cost of doing business, more so than I used to do, so that I can ensure product is available on shelves in my online store, wherever, so I'm not losing that sale. I'm not losing that customer because I don't have the product. And we saw a number of brands struggle with this in the early days of COVID, from cleaning products to a lot of consumer staples. As we all rushed to stores to buy, majority of the brands struggled with running out of products and taking weeks, sometimes months to restock those shelves. So there's huge focus on sales and operations planning from a inventory perspective, to make sure inventory is positioned in the right spots. Manufacturing is happening much closer, in a much more agile way to customer demand. So that's one side of it. And then when we look at within the four walls of distribution and fulfillment operations, we're seeing a few things in terms of solutions and software that's being built. One is being able to communicate the constraints of space, labor, and automation resources to the selling side, so that those constraints are taken into account when a promise for an order is made. So there's much more feedback to the selling side. Then there is the predictive positioning of inventory and labor within the warehouse based on the demand that I might see coming to my operation, so that I'm positioned well to successfully deliver, pick, pack, and deliver those orders that I'll see. Then there is the dynamic, fluid orchestration of humans and labor, which was mentioned earlier too. That's how we see within the warehouse. How do we ensure we're prioritizing the right task and prioritizing the right resource, whether it's human or automation, to perform that task. So when we look at the foundational elements of a distribution or fulfillment operation, beyond inventory, it's space, it's labor, and it's automation. It's become much more of an optimization problem as opposed to the traditional approach of rules-based, linear, sequential decision-making, which just does not respond well as changes happen much more rapidly. And then the third piece that we see is customers are tapping more and more into marketplaces, and networks and platforms, whether it's from a freight movement perspective or last mile delivery perspective, or labor perspective, or even just overall fulfillment perspective. There are a number of tech-enabled 3PLs coming up, like ShipBob and Deliver and some of those players. So there's much more inclination and openness to tap into these marketplaces and networks, so that you as a retailer or a brand are not having to big capital investments to solve the needs of your logistics and supply chain operations.
I don't want to add too much, but sorry, and actually this next question ties into what I was going to say anyway, so maybe we just launch into this question and I'll address it there.
So, none of us have this magic crystal ball. We all wish we did, but we don't. I wanted to kind of get Matt Rivenbark from Schaefer to kick this one off. From your vantage point, what is the future of warehouse automation in a post-pandemic world? What kinds of automated technologies do you see sticking around in the new normal, and what does this mean for the future of supply chain and logistics?
Well, I was going to say on the last question about, before the pandemic, a lot of my clients, well, basically all of them, the number one reason why they were coming to us for warehouse solutions was that they couldn't find, available or stable labor to work in the warehouse. So I think that has been a problem they've had for a while now, and obviously the pandemic, presents a different symptom of why that, or a different cause of why that's happening, but it's the same symptom, right? So, you're going to see companies move from, either manual or semi-automated to a much higher degree of automation to limit, the amount of people working in the warehouse so that, if there's disruptions in the labor pool, whether it's by pandemic or some other source, that they're able to get over that quickly and, still fulfill the service level agreements they have with their clients. And I think this includes, moving from, traditional conventional racks serviced by forklifts to more automated crane equipment with high bay warehouse racking, shift from man to goods type of methodologies to goods to person, or even robotic picking, which reduces obviously the personnel requirements and even can spread people out so they're not passing each other within aisles when they're picking in a more manual setting. So kind of just to build some socially distant working habits into the warehouse. I also think you'll see some software solutions out there that are being implemented to help promote social distancing. So, if I'm in one area with an RF gun, I have another person walking down that aisle in, real time. It can change direction and put you to a different location for another pick to keep you from crossing or coming close to that person. So I think there's definitely some solutions out there from a software perspective that could help. But again, I do see that a higher degree of automation is going to be something that companies will be investing in the new normal, if that's what you want to call it.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate that. If there wasn't anything else anybody else had to add, I know that we did want to kind of review the poll question that was raised earlier, and I do have the results posted online. Not sure if anybody wants to provide some feedback on the fact that 100% of our current audience has been impacted in some way. Does anybody want to chime in about thoughts on that?
This is Doug. I would I would have been shocked if anyone had answered no. Have the requirements of social distancing and shipping versus shopping didn't impact anyone. I think everybody, regardless of their role or position or placement, has had impacts. But business impacts have been, significant. And to the last question and the response that Matt provided, when you think about goods to person versus persons to good, and the ability to create social distancing, leveraging technologies and automation enabled by intelligent software provide the ability to adapt and start to overcome some of the limiting factors that have existed for so long. Whether it be shuttle-based ASRS type goods to person or crane-based goods to person, or dark operated facilities with minimal amount of personnel interaction. Everything that is being done is to enable addressing these concerns, and they've been a move in this direction prior to COVID. COVID has accelerated it. I've talked with various companies in the AGV AMR space and working towards some collaboration, and the movement towards robotic solutions is becoming more and more viable and required, as well as how do we ensure more and more visibility to what's happening within the facility. And I think it was mentioned by Jagan or maybe it was Matt previously, with IoT sensors that are being included or adapted to be consumed by software and redirect users in a certain direction to enable that social distancing. So contactless processing, social distancing, of course, has impacted the distribution industry, the supply chain industry, significantly. So I would have been shocked if anyone had answered no to that.
Okay, perfect. So it does look like we have some questions from the audience that we can kind of go over. One of them being, first of all, gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of today. That was some wonderful information, so I do appreciate your participation in today's webinar. Many automation companies offer this micro-fulfillment center solution. Do you see this as the future? Where do you see it? Is it a shuttle system or mainly ground robotics, or a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, this is Matt from Schaefer. I think you're going to see a combination of both, depending upon, what the order profile and the types of products that are being handled. I mean, we focus on shuttle systems and can speak to that fact. And, there's a lot of good solutions out there for putting a subset of inventory into these back of store type of warehouse functions, or these dark warehouses, or whatever you want to call it. And they're implementing these shuttle solutions in the back there with a small subset of inventory that's also planned to be on the shelves. And you're able to store that, rapidly retrieve it out, and then pick and pack it for delivery, for store pickup, or whatever that last mile operation is. I mean, I do think you'll continue to see those things implemented, and at a higher rate, and it's probably going to be one of the fastest growing areas in the automation industry. I mean, it's very similar to the e-com boom of the last decade and a half, where companies have really gotten into these shuttle-based, high throughput, high storage, quick delivery types of systems, and it's just going to further proliferate into the grocery market. As during COVID, it's wild. I mean, so many people were so against grocery shopping online, and I think it's brought a lot of people who are, number one, against that, but also some of the older folks in our society that didn't utilize these things in the past, but are now relying on them for their safety. In the future, they're going to be using them just out of convenience. So I don't think it's going to be going away. I think it's just going to continue to grow, and the demand for that is going to be a big boon for the automation industry over the next, 5 to 10 years.
To add to that, from a software and automation perspective, what we see is our traditional approaches of WMS, that they're having to evolve to account for the blurring lines between hardware and intelligence in terms of software. That's where we start to see a WES approach or intelligence that's being brought to the table between the automation providers and software providers. There is a space there where there will be an evolution of approaches between WMS players and automation players to find the right middle ground as to where processes get orchestrated, where the intelligence is, and where the physical movement of automation is orchestrated.
That's perfect. So what do you think are the main problems or the pain points in the future supply chain of temperature-controlled products?
Could you say that one more time?
Yes. What do you think are the main problems or some of the pain points when working in the future of the supply chain when dealing with temperature-controlled products?
Well, I mean, two things come to mind. One, the labor aspect. Obviously, I think as regulations continue to grow about how people can interact and how long they can work within a freezer or cooler environment, that it's going to push clients even closer to investing into higher automation for the cold chain. I forget the second part of that question. Can you say it one more time?
Sure. What are some of the problems in dealing with the future of the supply chain when it comes to temperature-controlled products?
Right. And the other side of that is the track and trace aspect. So from a software perspective, making sure that products aren't breaking the cold chain. So, they're trying to tie together temperature readings from trucks to the warehouse, to the distribution center, and then to the end client. And through automation, you're able to track how long products are in and out of different temperature zones, and automation provides a lot of visibility to that.
Yeah, I think about it as I don't know if they're new. They are new challenges. I think there are more solutions that are available now. They'll continue to be available from a sensing, responding, exception handling perspective. There are solutions that are being built. There are more solutions that are continuing to come to market from, leveraging a lot of the edge technologies, sensing technologies.
So as e-commerce has grown, the packing and shipping efficiency has become more of a challenge with a lot of wasted space in boxes that are shipped to consumers. Is this a broad problem, and what is happening to reduce inefficient packing and reduce shipping costs?
I mean, I will say that this is probably a problem across the whole spectrum. I mean, they're coming out with lots of different solutions that we're integrating into our automated systems for end-of-line packaging that, real time can look at the product being shipped and actually build a box around it, or you can have other types of machines that will cut boxes down from a larger stock and making sure that is as dense as possible.
And what are some of the difficulties? Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I just wanted to add, there have been solutions around which, again, our own WMS does a level of optimization as far as space within choosing the right box and space within the box. What seems to be happening is in the name of convenience and service to customers, there tend to be more shipments of an order because the shipments are getting split across multiple locations, and as opposed to consolidating the order into one box or one package, there are just more packages going out. So it's a combination of order sourcing, that in the name of convenience, as well as continuing to find ways to better optimize the space within a box or a chosen box, is where we see solutions emerging. Because it's a problem. I mean, at our own house, we see a box show up, it seems like every other day or every day, and there's just, one tube of toothpaste comes in this big box from shippers. That's a problem from a sustainability and environmental sensitivity perspective.
Yeah, I think in some respects that is a great point, and I think that the environmental impacts and the awareness from a consumer's perspective we're starting to see, various online shopping stores provide potentially incentives to delay the delivery so that a consolidated shipment could be made. That's one way that it may be addressed. As far as package efficiency, there's a lot of, dynamic box manufacturing equipment that can be integrated with a standard WMS that provides, cartonization, optimization, if you will, that can provide the right packaging dimensions to feed to a machine that can cut a corrugated box virtually to exacting size so that we're not shipping air, decreasing the number of the amount of empty space in a truck or in a ship, whatever it might be, to minimize some of those impacts. So I think the combination of multiple technologies as well as consumers' awareness of the impact are going to be what starts to move us away from this instant gratification economy to a little bit more sustainable supply chain-oriented economy. And it's going to meet somewhere in the middle. So it's really a matter of addressing the inefficiencies in packing with equipment and intelligence, and then also offering opportunity to potentially decrease these micro shipments and a desire to get something immediately. People become a little bit more proactive in how they're shopping because of the impacts on the economy, both in transportation as well as, paper and plastic packaging goods.
Perfect. I think we'll have time to be able to sneak in one more question. What are some of the main difficulties in optimizing a supply chain in the last mile delivery part?
This is Reggie with Abby, and in our industry, what we see a lot of is that a lot of shipments are being impacted by changes in interstate and intercountry customs, and it means that the processes of clearing customs or clearing taxation across state borders is becoming much more complex, and it has introduced a whole new level or a whole new group of documents that shippers have to be able to process, and different requirements within those documents. So, for example, I habitually shop on eBay, and I do a lot of e-commerce type or similar types of shopping. And one of the things that we've seen just recently in the past year is the introduction of sales tax for out-of-state purchases and out-of-country purchases. And that little thing that has occurred in online purchasing has had a profound impact on shippers and how they adapt not only their shipping processes, but have documents. For example, commercial invoices are a critical part of being able to ship across borders or state lines and different jurisdictions, and managing different regulations. And those documents will change. They will have different information requirements, and the shippers actually have to adapt really quickly to those changes in order to be compliant. That's just one change that we see. But as the other speakers will allude to, the processes in manufacturing have changed, and the volume and the types of goods that are being shipped is also significantly increased this year because of the pandemic. And that has created some process challenges too, that many of these organizations are starting to look at more process discovery as a way of understanding how their processes need to change. Because we can talk about WMS, we can talk about ERP and all the systems, and those are good in-system processes, but how do the handoffs work? How do they work among different systems and different segments of the processes that use different technologies, different processes, different organizations, and becoming more aware of that interaction has been the new set of demands that we've seen this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As I think as Jagan mentioned earlier, the platform-oriented visibility will be a more and more urgent need for product suppliers to be able to optimize that last mile because of the diverse demands, the diverse product profiles, and the diverse SLAs that are needing to be met. There will be an optimization process that is starting to engage or emerge where there's these cross-product, from a software perspective, cross-product optimization initiatives in a platform-oriented provision of solution, whether it's TMS, WMS, ERP, or OMS. All of these elements kind of collaboratively working together through interconnectivity to provide the overall visibility and optimize that last mile and minimize the number of trucks on the road to achieve delivery against the desired SLAs.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I know we're getting over the time here, and I do appreciate Reggie, Doug, Jagan, and Matt for all of your participation today and all your insight. I know it was truly valuable. And to our registrants, an archived version of today's webinar will be posted on Food Logistics and STCE's websites. So this is Marina Mayer, Editor-in-Chief of Food Logistics and Supply and Demand Chain Executive, and I look forward to you turning into future webinars. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.